Divine rise, gods and goddesses. Hope y'all enjoying this beautiful Friday. Um, for some of y'all, it's the end of the week. For some of us, it's the beginning of the week of our work day. Whichever one it is, it's not more impactful than a nice inspiration to uncover and get us set for the days ahead. Also, the moon is in Virgo. It's a good time to rebuild and refocus ourselves. Title of this, of course, we were building on it for a couple of days now, is generational curses. That is one of the biggest keys to shine some light on the dark spots in our DNA, the dark spots in our memories, the dark spots in our lives, in order to fully encompass what our rising is and what our true purpose is through our passions. A couple of the points I'm gonna get into today is basically on the indoctrination from religion to texts like the Willie Lynch letter. And then we're gonna get into the miseducation, which is a lot of things that we did in order to survive, or the repetitious acts that are put into our everyday lives in order for us to survive, to get to sustain where we're at right now. Basically, we have to get into the mindset of breaking free from those aspects. And usually when you start into your spiritual journey, a lot of things come to the surface that we were always known, but we didn't put light to be aware of. A lot of the things that we knew that we needed to work on in order to get to this is going to be forced to us in that aspect to make us get to our best self. Remember, everything that is good isn't sustained based on something that started through some type of event in that traumatic sense. A lot of us don't realize that the reason that it's coming into fruition, and it seems to be a lot harder for us in that aspect, is because we're unearthing something. And in that thought process, when we start unearthing things and uncovering things, it's not as pretty as we want it to be. It's not that wrapped up, made nice and neatly in a bow. But you have to understand, like, in order to cultivate new soil, in order to plant those seeds, you have to dig into the dirt. Our hands have to get dirty in that aspect, in that sense. The biggest thing that ties to everything you've been tuning in, sharing, watching the videos, share, like, if you don't have a chance to even catch on this one, it's available on the page. Tune in, if to the ones that have been following me through this transition, especially to the live phase of the God Thought series, the God Thought reprogram, as we're gonna title it for the day. Just put a title to it. I started with Where's Home and went deeper into the structure of getting your home in order and cleansing your home into that aspect. We went into the angels and demons. We went into vanity, being ego's best friend. If you have looked back at the page and you saw the pieces about divorcing from humanity, divorcing from lower self, all of these things are within the nature. All of these things are within the nature of us getting back to ourselves. And a lot of these things will lead us to the said generational curses that we suffer from or we're under and don't even realize. A lot of the times, the biggest thing that we are going to come into when we come into knowledge, when we come into ourselves, into growing into ourselves in our spiritual journey, are the pushbacks. A lot of the pushbacks are stemmed from the previous indoctrinations and the trauma that we've been through. One of the biggest things that we start to dive into, one of the first things is when you start going into the spiritual encompassing is basically religion. And if you understand what the definition of religion is to bind to a set of ideals. With spirituality, it's literally, I saw a post the other day. It had two fish in the sea, but one fish was in a fishbowl and the other fish was in water. So basically, religion is to bind you to the concept of you can't survive outside of something containing you. So you contain yourself. We're already contained in our vessels. We're already contained in our vessels, and the main part of us being in these vessels is to learn what we need to learn before we are released, before we transition to our next phase. So the biggest thing with that is religion sustains the bounding relief of staying connected to something that's outside of yourself, to not look within yourself. And a lot of the things with the generational curses, they sustain that factoid. So when you're looking at something as simple as, we can go into the aspect of soul food as an example. We were given the worst parts of the pig, we were given the worst parts of the animal, and we turned them into food to sustain for us to live. We were given these things in that aspect of to live, but us being naturally spiritual, that was our creative energy. That was our divine energy creating something for us to survive off of. Now we're stuck in this thought process of, what's up, Solar Being? Thanks for watching. When you whenever as you link on, go ahead and throw in the number 8 for infinite, because we know infinite knowledge is infinite. We building now. But when we take that thought process to ourselves, we seem to get lost in the sentimental value of it. So we don't start using the connection of critical thought to the thought process of, what were we eating before they forced us to eat these foods? So what a lot of these strands in these generational curses is something that was sustained for us to survive. But as we know, as we're coming into knowing, we have to break away from those constraints into ourselves that have led us to that. So when you look at everything, basically breaks down into holding us bound to something. And our ego, that's been programmed into our subconscious mind, into our true mind. And our ego steadily, it's always going to steadily protect us, protect that thought, protect those thoughts. So as we expound our minds and open our minds to new knowledge and open our eyes and open our sights to these new things for ourselves, that's when we start to grow. That's when our subconscious starts to re-download. It starts letting stuff bleed out. And usually the things that bleed out are the things that we need to come face to face with. A lot of things into the simple nature of something as put the old against the young. So that's why it's harder for us to listen to our elders. It's harder for us to connect to our ancestors, connect to our elders, because we have a thought process of, it's new, we're going to create it, we're going to create our own path. And we're forgetting that even in that aspect of that by itself, if you look at something, let's go back as far as the 60s with protesting. They protested equal rights, the civil rights movements, all of these movements, no matter who they were orchestrated by originally. We have to get past that. It was still done by us. Anything that was orchestrated, even if it was orchestrated outside of us, in support outside of us, it needed our power to survive. It needed our say so. It needed our head nod. So even in that aspect to that, us being gods and goddesses, us being chaos beings, us being titans, us being the ones that are with the power. We're the only ones with the true power, with that true knowledge, that true essence of power. It doesn't work not unless it has us with it. So you take that aspect into that. That's why a distraction works so well, because it attaches to us emotionally. But we're not using our spiritual wisdom or our critical thinking or our logics to take us to the next level of why did that work? The only reason it works is with us. They got to put our face, our image, our thought process, our energy into it for it to work, for it to go forward. Their standards of beauty, the standards of beauty, the standards of music, all these things were inventions of us originally. So in that thought process, if you separate if you separate an entity from its beginnings, what happens to it? It becomes easily put into whatever you put it into. It'll start believing whatever you tell it to believe into. That goes similar to you listen to the just like with voodoo and how they said it was evil. The Haitians didn't believe they didn't have the concept of death. We never had a concept of death into that aspect until they showed us that we can die in the physical form. They had to separate us from our spiritual energy, from our spiritual connection, in order for us to believe certain things. And that's where a lot of these generational curses, they reinstill and they reinforce these things. One big generational curse that we keep passing down is religion. If it works for you, it works for you. But all I can say is think and go deeper and go further into it. Because if you're allowed to, in order for something to be believed to live or come into the evolution or the even for it to live, it has to keep being reinstated to you. There's no real depth to it. Most times when we go to Sunday, first Sunday, fourth Sunday, communion, all these rituals that they put us into, it's always the same stories. Every year you go to Easter service and it's the same story. Every year you go to Christmas service and it's the same story. Why is it the same story? Why, after 15, 20 years, 30 years going to the same church, y'all haven't expounded past anything else? It's to keep you locked into that keep us locked into that sustain of all we are children. A child never grows. We have to grow into something. What are we supposed to grow into? What are we really? They're teaching us. They're trying to give you a thought process of who you are in a physical aspect, and you're not learning what you are in a spiritual concept. And that ties into something as how you're surviving. Remember, how we survive is detrimental to how we rise and how we come into ourselves. So the things that you use to survive, the things that you use in repetition to survive, to sustain your life, to sustain where you're at, the only way to gather more is to let go of what you use to survive. We have to let go in that aspect of the things we use to basically numb the pain to ourselves. Because all we're doing is numbing and sustaining. You wake up in the morning, grab that cup of coffee. Oh my goodness, I grabbed that cup of coffee. Now in your mind, you're basically stimulating. Your mind's on 10 because the basically you just gave your body the same fix as cocaine, the same fix as cocaine into that aspect, and now you're gonna run through your day just to survive through your day. That first 20 minutes of your day should be dedicated to water. Put water in your system. Allow your body to come online. We don't allow ourselves time to come online because we're given the constraint that time. We only have 24 hours because we've been programmed into this constraint of time. So for a lot of people, when they start coming into themselves, our battle with ourselves is, do I have enough time to do this? Man, I have so much stuff I have to do. I have so much stuff I have to take care of. In that same aspect, into the context, the link block of that is like, why do I have all this stuff? Why did I create this in the first place? Why was this created in the first place? As we notice, a lot of the times when I know what I've noticed in me going into my spiritual hierarchy, spiritual self, is everything is everything. That's one thing. Everything is everything. One big thing for me is understanding the closer I get to something, the more prominent a distraction comes. The closer you get to something, the more prominent or the seems some distraction comes to you of your older self. Things that used to resonate to your older self will always come into play. That's one of our biggest things that comes to us in our journey to get into our higher self. You'll find yourself in the beginning when you come into your spiritual encompassing to our energy. The old things come into us, we'll start to stray away from, or we start to dive more into. Welcome, Nika. Welcome to the welcome, Queen, to the conversation. As you know, we're getting into generational curses. One of the biggest things that is happening to us is the sustain of those curses. And they show us those sustain of those curses basically in media all the time. One of the longest running shows, I think it's on VH1. Yeah, it's on VH1. I haven't watched TV in a long time. The most you'll see me watch it is Netflix or Hulu or whatever. In that aspect, they'll show you Basketball Wives. They'll show you Love and Hip Hop. They'll show you Black Ink. They're sustaining an image in that aspect. Even when they have an aspect in that outlet, they have to add power to it in some way to sustain that image. And when you see the images, after a while, when you're into your God and Goddess, when you wear onto our God and Goddess entity, some of that stuff will upset the shit out of you. That's not me. Damn, we do that. Our people do some of these things. But that's the example in order to know where you're at. Instead of looking at it as, well, that's what they think, that's what we are, that's what we are. They're showing you what you are. They're showing you who you are, or who you were, rather, not what you are. What you are now is the energy inside your vessel learning to grow. That's what we are now. We are in our vessels learning to grow. We're going through the things that we went through in traumatic events to unlock. And what we're doing is we're becoming stuck within the breaks. So if a shell breaks, similar to if a hermit crab is in its shell and it's too big for its shell, it looks for another shell. Then you can link that to crabs in a barrel. Our natural environment wasn't the barrel. Our natural environment wasn't the slums. It wasn't the ghettos. It wasn't these impoverished places. If you go back and look at our history in the monumental phase of us coming into our lives, when we were putting everything in the monuments and we're leaving ourselves our text and everything for us to look at and dive back into to study our knowledge. You look at monumental Egypt, you look at Timbuktu, you look at even when you go into China and you go back into older China and you look at these buildings, they all resemble pyramids. There's pyramids everywhere into that aspect of that. That's our monumental phase of us coming into what we go into. And then you can go further back. That's when you have to go further. We tend to get stuck because of the sentimental value, soul food. So it's feeding our soul at that moment of time for us to survive. But we have to go further back. And you look at the dogma, you look at the different tribes, you look at the Dogon tribe, and you look at these places. And since we're taught to look at things outside of us for value and it has to look pretty and pristine, we're not understanding in our spiritual, the biggest thing that separates us from our spiritual energy and us growing in our spiritual sense is materialism. The biggest thing that separates us in that aspect is materialism and our lack of understanding. So the more you're tied down into this materialism, the more you're easier to control because, oh, I need a house, I need a car, I need this. You need a place to stay. You already have a place to stay. In the spiritual concept, we got to go into the spiritual concept. In your mind is housed everything that you need. In our minds is housed is everything spiritually that we need. How we create outside of that, when we start creating our space, it should be built upon that thought process. What's stuck on us on our thought process now is that we're stuck into the constraint of what we were taught. So we don't look at ourselves in that aspect of, do I really need this? What benefit does it bring to me as myself? What benefit does it bring to me now? That's what we need to start looking at. So you look at the Dogon tribe, you look at some of the pictures that they sent us on them, they look like there was something from out of this world. Because we are from out of this world. We are the extraterrestrials in that sense. So now that we understand, and most of the times we understand some of the curses that have been put upon us, but we're not looking into why it was put there in the first place. What is it tethered to? Most of the hooks that are in us right now, most of the hooks that are in you right now, your vices, your vexes, all the things that are in you right now are something that you put there. They're connected to something, and they feed off something that you put there. They're ultimately strained to your ego, based on how we survive. And some of us, the biggest fear to it is, I can't survive without that. Because in your mind now is, damn, I've been in that space for so long. What am I outside of that space? What am I? It's one thing to say you're a god and a goddess. It's not a title. It's what you are. It's your energy. We have to start looking at things in that aspect as energy. So when you start looking at everything as aspect as an energy, what energy am I allowing into my life at this very time to survive in that space? What energy are you letting into your life at that very time that keeps you locked into that space? It gets scarier for us the deeper we go into it. The deeper we go into that dark space within ourselves. And it's crazy because we'll literally sit there and we'll go through our dark times. We'll go through something, a breakup or a loss of a family, transition of a family member. It's not a loss. It's just a transition. Their energy is not within you. You have key insight into it. And we allow outside natures around us to put us into that dark space. We allow outside natures to put us into a dark space. But even in the aspect and understanding that everything is everything is a learning experience, how did you get there in the first place? We tend to lock into the memory and thought process of, oh, wow, I wasn't like this when I was 18. I wasn't like this when I was a kid. I remember when I was little. Good. That's what we need to link back into. Whenever you have the moments to yourself when you're alone in that aspect to yourself, those are the best times to learn, because that's when you go into an alpha wave state. That's when you start thinking about the craziest things, like, why did this happen? And why was my mother so hard on me but so lax on my brothers and sisters? Why was my father so lax with me, so hard on me, but so the same in that same thought process? Why were my aunts and uncles did certain things? Why was there so much radio silence about certain things? And as that comes to the surface, those are the things we need to tap into and work on. One big thing for us is that the survivor R. Kelly. The only reason that resonated with you in such a way and resonated with someone else in such a way is because that's been happening in our communities for a long time. That ideal has been launched in our communities for a long time. But where did it come from originally? if you look back at the history in something as simple, we understand that a lot of these realities that have been forced upon us came from that what we didn't understand what oppressed us. The things that come into your life that you do not handle, that we don't handle in our present, is only snowballs into the next generation. So we pass on everything but what we need to pass on. We pass on everything but knowledge. We'll sit here and teach our children. We'll teach our children, nieces, nephews. We teach the younger ones of us. Even we teaching ourselves, because we're always teaching ourselves. A day not learned is a day that you die. It's a day not worth living. So in that aspect, we teach ourselves that I just want to live good and comfortable. So outside of that, as long as I'm living good and comfortable, sustaining my comfortable life, I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to take on anything else. I don't want to speak on anything else. I don't want to speak on that day that happened to me when I went over to my Uncle Eddie's house. I don't want to speak about that day that happened even at my Aunt Stephanie's house. I don't want to talk about these things. And then what that does, it translates later on, since there was no attention brought into it. Perhaps that's the reason that it manifested itself into something else. Take a look at the gay cousin. Take a look at the aunt that doesn't really come around the family too much. Take a look at these aspects and why. Why do we not talk about these things as a part of the sustaining the happy image? It's sustaining the light. A lot of the things with religion is about sustaining the light. Sustaining a light that's burnt out a long time ago. So we're basically playing Russian roulette whenever we allow ourselves to be bounded by certain things. We're playing Russian roulette by, we give ourselves, here's a psychological program that on a breakdown. We are taught to look outside ourselves for things in that aspect. So they say, let it go and give it all to Jesus. Psychologically, you're telling yourself in your mind I don't have to handle these things. Something outside of me will. So if you constantly streaming that thought process, that stream of thought into your head, that Black Thought album is actually fire. That stream of thought into your mind. Every time you look for something, you're looking without yourself to go get it at first, without unlocking it inside yourself. So if you find yourself hurting for something, you find yourself more lost. We're more lost in looking for something, not realizing where it is right there in that mirror. The same space when we lose something in that same space where we're thinking that we lost something, it's the same place we're going to find it. We just have to uncover where it came from. We have to uncover that start. We have to start. There's no such thing as yesterday. Because yesterday is just a bunch of memories and a bunch of constraints that we are going to be thinking about in the past. And there's no such thing as tomorrow. All we have in this constraint is today. Every day is today. So the longer you take to start and the longer you take to grow yourself, guess what? You're just going to be waiting again till today comes. So how many todays are you going to give yourself before you actually start getting into it? And it gets dark. It gets scary. It gets fearful. All these emotions are going to come through. The tears are going to pour. The anger is going to come. You may want to go break something. But learn how to focus that energy into getting deeper into what it is. We look at a lot of things such as, I'll give you something that we've been built on. We've been built on to survival. We're in a constant state of survival. We don't even think about creation, that we're so stuck on survival. We're so stuck on survival, we don't think about how to create things to sustain and grow something different. So we survive within a realm that's an illusion to itself. If you think about a yellow car enough, what do you see all the time? You're going to see a yellow car. If you think about uh stuff being hard and being bad, guess what? Everything's going to be hard and bad. If you think about everything being against you, everything shall be against you. Instead of looking at it for what it is. Everything outside of you is playing a part based on your thought process. Our power is within that. So the only reason you can look at something and say that it's better than you is because you believe it's better than you. So if you look at it and you're like, something's better than me, that person's better than me in that aspect. They're not better than you. They're simply a constraint of something that you need to go into understanding more. That's where the fear base comes in. If I make you fear it, you don't go try to understand it. So if I look at it's something funny, one of the biggest generational curses for us outside of religion is this oppressed feeling or being oppressed. But that was just a survival tactic for us. Now we're stuck in the paradigm of thinking something's oppressing us. If something is truly oppressing you and it wants to keep you down, it wouldn't let you wake up. Think about how much power something doesn't really have. The only worst thing that can happen is you're released from your body. The only worst thing that can happen is death in that aspect of transitioning forward. The ones that understand that, they don't want you dead. They don't want you releasing from your physical body. They don't want you dead. The subordinates under that, in order to play both sides, okay, cool, we got to kill this many people to get this purpose over here for sustaining our life. Our thought process now is to consume, consume, consume. Because we're cattle. We're like cattle to them. We're cattle. The purpose of arguments, the purpose of keeping us in a mental mind state of I need that drink, or I need to smoke, or I need that drug, or I need this, or I need those shoes. There's more than one drug other than the drug that you inhale or you sip or you snort or you shoot into your vein. The same thing that can be a drug is that gold chain around your neck that has that crucifix on it. You need to be seen as a child of God when you are a God. You need to be seen in those red bottoms. When your feet are all you're doing is putting on a constraint to you grounded to your own natural space, to Mother Earth. I need to be seen as my hair is on fleek and my eyebrows and everything's in line. When all you're doing is covering up your natural connection to the sun, the natural connection to the elements around you. Their standard of beauty is a generational curse to you. Because in order to try to fit in, we were never meant really to fit in. I don't care what you do, you still gonna stand out. Whether you go put blonde streaks in your hair, or you lock your hair up, or you do fox locks, or whatever you put in your hair, you're still gonna stand out. When you go into their space, you still gonna stand out. But then you gotta look further, even bases of hair. They're passing laws on it's okay to wear locks, to wear your natural hair. And then you'll sit there and put energy behind it, like, yeah, it's okay for us to wear our natural hair. Why is somebody outside of you being able to dictate your life in that aspect? Why is someone able to dictate your life in that aspect? To tell you that it's okay to wear your natural hair. And then you give them power by saying, yeah, I'm going to go stand behind that platform on that protest. Not understanding that every distraction is a win for them. Whether if they make you happy, they win. If they make you sad, they win. They make you angry, they win. They keep you in fear, they win. They don't care what the result is as long as you were distracted enough not to tap into yourself. When I wake up every single morning, I need no one to tell me that I am a god, I am a titan, I walk around now. I'm in the mantra. After and I'm gonna do a breakdown of the show Lucifer. Stay tuned for that. But even at an aspect, I know I'm the light bearer. So I put myself into the physical manifestation and understand I'll talk around and say I'm Lucifer most of the time. Because I understand the dynamics and the dichotomy of what Lucifer is. I understand what Baphomet is. So when I speak and I lay my seed out, I'm speaking in my reality in restraint to plant that seed at the vibration I'm at. If you're fearful of it, that means you're not on that vibration. If you're not sitting there to understand it, that means you're not on that vibration, on that frequency. Ego would have me sitting here every single day trying to convince somebody of something that I have the knowledge on. In the same way that the only way is retracing my steps that I took, or retracing steps back. They have to take this. They have to take the same methodologies to get onto their path to understand it. And when they get to it, it's going to have a different meaning and different interpretation for them because they have a different purposing. We get stuck on and we get upset with people most of the time on why aren't you understanding? Why aren't you understanding this? Not even thinking about it to that thought process. That's their purpose at that time. In that moment of alignment, that's their purpose. All you can do is plant that seed and keep going forward. Best example is you. The best example is you. So there's so many curses that we suffer from. One big curse that we suffer from is this thought process under survival is stem from the sharecropping days of our prisoner of war. Our ancestor that was in that prisoner of war aspect is lay down on your back, get pregnant. Lay down on your back, get pregnant, man to take care of you. It doesn't work anymore. That's when you look at the marriage rate as opposed to co-parenting is higher than the marriage rate. It's a learning experience. Why? Why is it not working anymore? Because it was never meant to sustain on us. And then that's when you can go break down into when they have the assisted living, Section 8, welfare, all these different things, WIC, all these programs that were originally, they gave power to it through us. And when you look at and you think about something like the Black Panther Party, and you know, they had the agents within the Black Panther Party, and we headed a lot of these things. But the reason that they were headed and they got such natural attention because it was enabled to sustain in order to build something for themselves. We are the power source. We are the generator, the operator, and the destroyers. We are the generators, the omnipresent, and the developers. We are the creators. So they need our energy to make anything work. So if I give you the thought process and then we pass it down, I don't even realize it. You know, if you get over there on that, Section 8 and that assistance, it can help you do things that you want to do. Not understanding that once you in it, you cannot go any further within that constraint. You only can work a certain amount of hours. I think it's like 25, 30 hours a week max. You only can make a certain amount of money. So how are you going to grow from something when you're get put into a constraint of what you cannot do? How can you put yourself in the thought process of the man in the household when you can't have most of them public housing things, you can't have a man in the household. You allow yourself to be put inside of a zoo. When we saw that they had us on display, like especially like Louis Vuitton had the zoo for the human zoos, they do it enough until it's mentally stuck into your brain, similar to the Willie Lynch letters, stuck into your brain, so you're doing it yourself. You're your own prison, you're your own inmate and your own warden. You're your own everything. There's no one oppressing you outside of yourself. You're your own warden, you're your own inmate. The warden is fueled by your ego, and the prisoner is your subconscious mind. So you submerge yourself and submit yourself to things outside of yourself. I'm just going to do enough for it just so I can get myself on my feet. But what's the percentage rate of how many people are actually on their feet? What's the percentage rate of you actually being on your feet in that moment in time? Everybody else is doing it. The age-old adage, I think my mom used to say it all the time to me. My aunt used to say it all the time to me. So if all your friends jumped off a cliff, would you go follow them? Would you go jump off the cliff too? How many of us are jumping off the cliff? And how many of us are standing at the edge of the cliff, understanding, knowing the ledge, or gaining the knowledge of the ledge that we're standing at? How many of us are going to take the jump off the ledge by ourselves and realize that we can fly? That's what it's meant by breaking those generational curses and vices. You can look at, for me on a personal tense, I look at my mother's side of the family. And for me to be able to bestow a story upon this, it's like, it shows how far, whenever you're able to look back at something and laugh at it or actually expound upon it in the understanding of it, congratulations, you've broken a curse. And now you're the start. Now everything after you is built on maintaining, on breaking away from that curse. A lot of I have my grandmother had 13 kids. No, 12 children. No, she had 13. She had 11 girls. It was 13. So she had 10 girls and 3 boys. 2 of my uncles are past. I actually had 4 uncles, actually. It's actually 14. It's crazy how I remember all the numbers. My grandmother is telling me that, she bringing that spirituality into it, telling me about that. I have 2 uncles that are still living, and I have 2 uncles that have passed. They've transitioned on. The 2 uncles that have passed with the conduit of what my other 2 uncles are using in suffering. It was because of alcohol. I have an uncle right now. He lives somewhere down there. He doesn't live that far from me. But he lives his entire day under the influence of alcohol. 40 ounce, snitch malt liquor, whatever it is. From his day when he wakes up till he goes to sleep. His entire work day delivering furniture, he takes his sips in between the day. And he can't wait to get off every single day to go grab a bottle. Because he's stuck within the pain of the things that he cannot fix or the things that he cannot subdue. From the losses of his brothers, separation from the family, and the family being in such a disarray into that thought process. But now he's numbing himself. And there's been a couple of times where I've had conversations with him, and he'll say some of the most, in that same instant, he'll say some of the most remarkable shit that I've ever heard in my life. He'll have a conversation about family and coming together and unity and unison and actually building something, even if it's a hot dog stand. And in that same light, that's when his demons get the best of him. And that's something that's not talked about. I remember one of the conversations that my mother had with one of the biggest arguments that I used to listen to, and I didn't understand at the time when I was young, but as I got older, I started more understanding to it, was my uncle is on that offender list, registered as a pedophile. But it was mum's the word, and let's not talk about that. Anything that brings pain, let's not talk about that. We have to get into the nature of anything that brings you pain. That's what we need to go at first. We already know what brings us joy. We can talk about our joys all day. But in order to sustain and maintain our joys, guess what we got to get to? We got to get through the pain first. So if I'm sitting there taking to a thought process, I remember my mom, till this day, will get super upset when my pops brings that up. But both of them are getting upset at the same thing because neither one of them are finding the ways to fix it. Because they're stuck into that religious confine of it doesn't exist because it's covered in the blood of Jesus. If I go grab some red paint and write down some words in a book, all my sins and all the discretions, what they call sins and discretions, and all my things that I've done bad, and I cover it in red paint, I know it's still there. Psychologically, in my mind, I know it's still there. Since it's pocketed in my subconscious, it's your subconscious thinks everything is true. So it thinks everything is normal and everything is good and that nature. So if I sit there and I let that stay there, I know it's there. The ones that know of it know it's there. But to everybody in the outside world, mum's the word. So now how do I deal with it? I have to inebriate myself in that aspect just so I don't think about it. But anybody that understands the alchemy of alcohol and the alchemy of psychedelics, the alchemy of marijuana, the alchemy of these, understands the practice of these things, they're meant to take you deeper into yourself, into a higher plane, to your higher self. So it lowers the physical inhibitions and it raises your awareness to the things that you were connected to in that mental state. That's why if you see a person that drinks and they're happy because they're an emotional drinker, they'll be happy at the same time they'll be sad. They'll start telling you how much they love you, how much you mean to them. But in that same aspect, let them think about something that they don't like or something that's haunting them into a demon that they haven't got control of. Remember, demons, Latin for Damien, which means intelligence. Something that they ain't put no light to in that knowledge. They get upset. They want to fight. They get aggressive. And then a person that's been in an aspect that's been, even to the aspect getting even deeper, a person that's been physically abused, you become what you hate or you become what you love. That's basically the line of understanding. If you understand to hate something, you become what you hate. So in that energy of being overly sexual, whether you're a king or a queen, I'm going to point that out to the queens most because it's something that's not taught about with our queens. And in order for me to understand, to become more androgynous and more one with myself and to my godship, I have to understand the feminine aspect, and vice versa for the feminine have to understand the masculine aspects of themselves, which women have been doing that by themselves anyway. That's why you have so many independent, strong. You have so many strong, independent queens, is because they tapped into their mental energy, to that mental space. Because they came in physical, they came in with the feminine energy. Of course, they have to understand the mental energy, the masculine energy. For us in the masculine, we have to understand the feminine energy. That's why you have so many examples of what not to be when you have these dudes. You have guys walking around here now, running around here being taken care of by women. because they've tapped into the more nurturing aspect of being nurtured by the feminine. And since they didn't have a true aspect, since we are in a patriarchal society, we're taught the man goes first. That becomes detrimental to your thought process. Because if the man keeps coming first and the woman's behind you, who takes care of you? And that breaks down into religion. Said, oh, God must be a man into that aspect. Leave it all to Jesus. You see how it all connects? And the more you uncover, the more that shit starts to connect. You realize how everything's ingrained into everything with that generational curse. In that aspect to yourself and growing into yourself, you start understanding that. So when I look at our queens that use the attention of their physical body, somewhere inside them, within their strands, something is broken into that aspect. Something has not been brought attention to. And a lot of times, if you don't bring attention to it, you bring it to the best way you know how. And usually the best way you know how is the way that it happened to you in the first place. The same way you heal is the same way you hurt. It's just polarities. The same way you heal is the same way you hurt. The same things you hate are the same things you love. The same reason you hate something is the same reason someone else loves it. Positive and negative. There's no good and there's no such thing as good. And they gave you the thought process of good and evil. They gave you the process of bad and good. They gave you those concepts, so you took away from the critical thinking of negative and positive. What's positive to you might be negative to somebody else. Us sitting here having this conversation is positive to us, but it can be negative to the ones outside of us that are trying to keep us into a certain level so we don't grow. So it's positive and negative. So how many of our queens, and it's a harder subject, but until we start discussing our demons, until we start discussing what's really wrong with us in that aspect, until we are more comfortable in having these conversations that become normal in the aspect of now we're protesting it about what it is. It's one thing to protest about it. It's another thing to organize to step past it. Understanding ourselves gets us into that nature. Because the more you understand about yourself, you understand why somebody came from the outside and did what they did. The more we understand ourselves, we understand the nature of others and why they do what they do. If I love myself and I wouldn't do anything to myself or anything to, I wouldn't display any of the characteristics that someone just displayed upon me when it comes to molestation, rape, and these things. I wouldn't do that to myself. I wouldn't display that. I have love for myself. I have understanding and compassion for myself. I have self-love and I've grown in myself. So I wouldn't leave that to somebody else. So why are they doing it? The same reason you love yourself is the reason that they hate themselves. Because they haven't found love. The biggest curse for us is like we didn't have most of the things that you start coming into in the spiritual presence. When you start becoming an example with your passion and your purpose, most of the things you're going to start realizing is, I wish I had somebody tell me this when I was like that. You were telling yourself. You're telling yourself now. That's your purpose. That's the purpose of the tragedy. So you become the example. We had to start passing on generational wealth. And generational wealth is just not in the material realm. Generational wealth is in the knowledge. The more stuff you expound upon in your life and you start getting ahead of in your life and you start taking away the power from it and re-encompassing, because energy doesn't die, it just has different conduits. So we start removing that conduit of this, we take away that conduit, we start taking away these conduits, the more the energy flows freely around us. If you look at a chakra system, if you look at our chakra system, every chakra system that you'll look at, it will show you that what holds that chakra down. Your root chakra is usually fear. Our sacral chakra is still more fear, grief. Our throat is contained by different imbalances. And I'll break those down. We'll break those down at a later time when I get into a later video. But they'll break that down. That's what's holding you back. So at the end of the day, the only thing that's holding you back is yourself in that aspect. So we go back to the generational curse, and I talk about my uncle. I love my uncle to death. I have unconditional love because I now have a deeper understanding. But it's not a deeper understanding in order for me to go have a conversation with him. Because until he's ready to have that conversation, the conversation will just feel attacked. Because he's in an environment that encompasses that. When things come to us, you can have a conversation with a family member you ain't had a conversation with in years, and they shed a lot of light on a lot of things. And you can get really upset. You can start getting mad. You want to break stuff. Once again, you want to cry. That's when you take control of your emotions and absorb it. Not to dwell in it, but to understand more about yourself. Everything that comes to you is going to show you more about yourself. Shadow work goes hand in hand with breaking generational curses. You're going to have a lot of people that are still living in those shadows that are not willing to come out of those shadows. And that's okay. All that's important is you're coming out of that shadow. Because you can't go in and give somebody the opinion or an exam, the keys to something if you don't have the keys first. Jay says it. Jay said that mess all the time. I cannot help somebody being as them, so I must come out. I must rise, and then in order to help them, I must create this gap so I can let down the ladder to let these people back, to help these people up. So the more understanding you have inside yourself in that energy, in that concept, the more energy you have inside yourself in that concept, the more you can help somebody else. We're given this thought process of just give without our heart's content and give to humanity, and it helps you, and it's a fix. One of the most mind-numbing drugs is humanity. Because you will sit here on every aspect and help everybody outside of yourself. Subconsciously expecting them to do the same for you. And then what happens? You get upset. Not everybody is you. Not everybody is going to think like you. Not everybody's going to love like you. Not everybody's going to be you. That's your gift. That's your power. Not everybody is like you. If everybody was like you, we wouldn't need help. Without this external example, you wouldn't know how to move. If all these streets were paved with gold, we wouldn't have any issues. But they'd be perfected and it would die. The only thing perfect is death. The only thing perfect is death. When you get to your highest aspect and you die, it's death. So how many times have you died? Every trauma is a moment to perfection. Every trauma happens is an end and it's a perfection. How you come out of it is that new growth. Every trauma that you go through, how you come out is your perfection. Every trauma that brings death to a part of yourself lays birth to your newest perfection, your newest progression. So what are you willing to let go of in order to start understanding those things? When we look at a lot of these generational curses, there's something as simple as we'll go into housing. You've been taught to sustain things just so it has power outside of you. We already understand that money isn't real. It's an illusionary tactic. It's used to keep you bounded. So you fall in love with money because we're stuck in that material vex. Now we're stuck with money. At the bottom of every dollar bill, every 20, every 100, I don't care what it is, it says debt at the bottom. So you don't have $100, you have 100 debts. Because the moment you get it, you go pay it off towards something. So now we're cursed with debt automatically. We're cursed chasing debt. Because the more you get into yourself, the more you understand it's like, I don't need anything outside of myself. I don't want anything. At this moment in time, I don't have a want for anything. Because I have everything that I want. And if I don't have it, I can go create it. I have everything I need. We have everything we need. You have everything you need within your vessel right now at this moment in time. You just got to remove those barriers and those curses in order to get to them. You're under a spell. We're under a spell, thinking that we need these conduits outside of us to make us feel better. You ever seen somebody that didn't smoke all day and how they start feeling erratic as hell? Man, I need me a blunt. I need this. Now you program it into your head. So everything that's going to usher in you needing that and going to go get that fix is going to come to you. Similar to when you pick up a bottle. And then we start making nice little tie bows of things that are reasons that we do it. I'm off. I had a long day at work. I was cooking. I was cleaning. I was hanging out with my girls. I was hanging out with my dudes. We put it in a nice little bow. And then we go into these environments. And the only thing that we talk about while we're doing this is the reason that we came to it in the first place. Think about the circle that's around you is based on a generational curse. Think about how many times you sat down with an old head and actually let's let them talk. And then you miss that conversation. I used to miss, before I came into understanding, I used to miss the conversations with my grandmother. My grandmother gave me some of the most insightful knowledge at the ages between 5 and 8 that I cherish to this day. And the distraction that was put in front of me was when they die, there's no more of them. I can't talk to them anymore. I'm in this, what did my grandmother ever do? What was my grandmother up to? What was my grandmother about? What was she doing? What was her purpose at the time where she was doing? She was surviving. My grandmother came up in the late 40s, my grandmother died when she was 85 years old. My grandmother transitioned. Her age is in equivalent to the year after I was born. Think about the numbers. The more you start understanding things, you understand the breakdowns. What happened when you were born? Take that time, type in your birth year. As you get deeper, type in your birth month. And figure out what happened when you were born. What instances happened in the world when you were born? Realizing everything is everything. Everything that happened had to happen in order for you to be where you're at right now. Bring that into the Zoom with that. Everything that happened to you brought you to where you at right now. So if it didn't happen, you wouldn't be here. That's the line. That's alignment. You had to see all these things in order we have to go through this timeline of things in order to have a barometer of what we don't want to be. But we get stuck on this aspect of, I never want that to happen again, but I don't understand it, so I don't know why it's not going to happen again. Why does this keep happening to me? Why do men keep cheating on me? Why these bitches ain't shit? We have these thought processes in our mind. Why these bitches ain't shit? Why I can't ever seem to get enough money? Why I can't ever seem to do this? That's the curse. You speak the spell. The only thing that has power, remember, the only thing that has power is you. Your mind, your mental is the only thing that has the power to it in that aspect of what it is. You're the only one that has power to it. So since you're the only one that has power to it, by you speaking why this and why that, and not understanding the etymology of the words when you're saying, why is this happening to me? Instead of what is this teaching me, you change the spell when you say, what is this teaching me? Because now you're aligning yourself with the universe. When you're saying why, you're putting yourself under something. When you're saying what, you're putting yourself above it. When you're saying why, you're putting yourself under it. When you're putting yourself why, you're putting yourself above it. What is this teaching me? Because whenever we're taught, we look at a book sits in front of you, you have to read down and look down at the book. Whenever you're saying why, it's like you're looking up. You're like, you look up at the sky, like, why is this happening to me? Now you're putting all your issues above you to weigh you down. Congratulations. That's the distraction to keep you down. The only thing that's oppressing you is your whys. The only thing that's oppressing you is the things that you're not willing to face, the things you're not willing to focus on. That's where these generational curses come from. We're passing on generational curses. How many of you witnessed a family member that was always intoxicated in some way, shape, or form, and you said you didn't want to do that? But you never had the chance. That's what I always mean. Give them flowers while they're living so they can smell them in that aspect. But you never really took a time to actually look at, like, why did they do that? That takes you down into the breakdown of what was going on in their life, what was going on in their timeline, in their moment when they were living, when they were in the physical form, that made them do that. And you'll start realizing a lot of those things link up with you. And then you have one or two choices: either you become it or you don't. There was a lot of things with my pops that I fell into with my father. Correction. And as we get deeper, I will start expounding the stories on that. But with my father, that my father did, I didn't understand why he did it. But I ended up, since I was in that line or in that alignment to what he was doing, I became a part of it anyway. I was already doing it. But the reason it was easier for me to release from it is because I saw his beginning. His middle was my beginning in understanding, because our stories, all your stories, everything is overlaps. His middle was my beginning, because my beginning of getting to know him was in the middle of his life, and his end was my middle. So someone else's middle can be your beginning. So you coming in on these conversations, and these lecture pieces, this is your beginning. But the only reason I can give you this knowledge and this information, whether it's from bibliography or it's coming from the energy level of coming from the more divine source for me, everything that I've gathered, is because now it's my middle. That gap is our example. My gap is the example. My middle is the gap for your example to your beginning. That's all we have, is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So my father's ending was my middle. That's when I started coming in. That's when I started coming online, even at that age, back in 2003, back when I was like 18, 19. I'm 34 now. So taking that aspect into that is like, you see how it works. My pops transitioned at 33. I came into my awareness, into my consciousness 1 year prior, a few years prior. I was growing into it prior. I came into enlightenment basically 1 year after the age that he passed. You see how the alignment works with the numbers? That's how you start understanding these lines and these scripts, and you start looking at the concordance. You're writing your own book. You're becoming, when you think about you look, and I'm gonna put a link in here for the Book of the Dead. I have my original Book of the Dead source was actually Becoming of the Day. When they broke it down and said it was a Book of the Dead, it's actually Becoming of the Day. It's becoming yourself to your higher self. When you take that aspect into that, you realize where you start at. We all have different starting points, but we have to start at those little starting points. So you look at a curse like that. My pops was in the streets. My father was in the streets. My pops was also in the streets. So even in that aspect, my mother basically stayed with, since she didn't deal with what she needed to deal with at that time, it repeated itself. Since my mother didn't deal with at that time, it repeated itself. And now my mom is with my pops. And since my father came through understanding, when I met my father in that aspect and broke that curse of actually getting to know who my father was, because so many of us don't know who our fathers are. When I broke that curse, it was like understanding that. So if you come into a moment in time like you don't have a relationship with your father, you don't have a relationship with your mother, in that aspect, all you really have to go off of is what? Because we understand now that in order to conquer over something, you must make the good bad and the bad good. You must flip everything around. So if you look at something like the story, you look at the story of Set, and they say Set was this. Set is what they use Set, and they turn Set into Satan. You take that aspect. Why was he so bad? You're only going to understand the negative and positive polarities based on a person and what their understanding is at that moment in time. We only understand that part into that clarity. So if I sit here and have a conversation with somebody that knew my father, it was very few people actually knew my father in that aspect because he never really came into certain spaces. They're already going to tell me things that they know that are good. They're going to tell me the things that are negative based on who they knew and how they knew him, how he benefited them at that moment in time. That's breaking that line for yourself. Everything that you come in contact with now at this moment in time is only going to take you to your next phase. You can't look at it as good and bad. I don't want none of the bad stuff to happen. That stuff has to happen. I don't want none of these negative things, the negative things to happen. It's going to have to happen. I don't want none of these positive things to happen. It has to happen because the positive connects to the negative and the negative connects to the positive. If your life is a stream of negative, you keep pushing away from yourself. So the more you sit here and you reinforce something negative with something negative, it just takes you away from yourself. So if you invoke into your life something as a talisman of energy, such as a bottle or a blunt, and it for a moment in time, it suspends you in a moment of time where you're at peace or you're not thinking about anything. Everything else that comes around that is going to be sustain that peace or sustain that feeling. So the longer that you sustain that feeling in that energy of that thought process, welcome to Montage. And you take that thought process into that, the longer that you come into it on the feeling and an aspect of your life, that's what's connecting you to it. Whatever you think, you literally create, whether it's positive or negative. So if you're going through a moment in time when you're saying, man, the world ain't shit, the world ain't got nothing for me, that's when you have to start doing the separation of being knowing of the world, but not being a part of the world. Because the longer that you're, what's up? We just getting in, came in on generational curses, the dark to our rise. Since you coming in the middle to it, since you get connected to it on this moment in time, this might shed a lot of light onto it for you. And then you always can go back, look at this video and other videos, come back. Once again, little shameless plug. But you take that thought process into that, just into that thought process, you coming online to something. Why did you come? Why did it come into your life? Why did that time and that moment come into the space of you at that moment in time? Because it was needed. What is it feeding? What is it? How are you going to use that fuel? That's the most powerful part to it. How are you going to feed it? What are you going to use that fuel to feed? Is it going to take you higher, or are you going to stay where you at? If you stay where you at, disregard it. Keep going forward. But I guarantee, since it's already came into your life at that point in time, it's going to keep repeating itself. Have you ever walked into a space and every time you go into a space, you keep hearing the same exact thing? How is it resonating with you? If you go into a space and someone's saying the same exact things over and over again every time you go into that space, that's something that you need to listen to. What is that teaching you? Not why, what? Because remember, when you say, why does this keep happening to me? You're putting it above you. When you're saying what, you're putting yourself above it. Why's put it above, what puts it below. As above, so below. So if I don't want something to be a part of my life anymore, I put it below me. But I have to understand it in a way so it doesn't keep rising back up and I can maintain it where it's at in its lowest form. The only way to truly come through a conflict and a battle, the one thing they say about war is some of the best wars are never fought, because it all starts in your mind. So if I don't give it any energy in that aspect, it doesn't come into fruition. If I don't give it power, it doesn't exist in my life. Yes, it still will be there in some way, shape, or form for somebody else to catch on to, but it's for me to understand myself more. Oh, shit. The more we get into the thought process of, yo, why does that not even work with me anymore? Because the fix is gone. The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone. That thought process, that song, the thrill is gone. The things you used to do when you was like in your teens don't exist to you anymore. Guess what? You've grown into your God and Goddess self. That's what that means. You've grown into your God and Goddess self. So it's okay to step away from the things that no longer resonate with your spirit and for you to grow in. You're going to start to notice that in your life, in this moment in time, that going out every night with your friends, it don't even exist anymore. You finding more peace sitting at the house, binge watching a TV show with the people that really matter to you. That includes yourself, that's self-love, rather than go out into the environment where you know what's going to happen. And then since you start reprogramming your mind, your subconscious already knows what's going to happen because you've already programmed it into it. So your ego is going to keep you away from it. One thing I've noticed in my spiritualist session, and a lot of the people that I actually have like consultations that I have conversations with on more private basis, you can hit me up on Messenger, message me through this. I'm gonna have my email where I'm gonna create the email today to put it together with this, and we can have further conversations to that nature. But in that thought process, everybody around me is different. I don't go around a lot of the same places I used to go around. So in that, that's a curse that you break it yourself. You break up every time you break a binding, you break a curse. And it starts with you. Every time you break a binding, you break a curse. And it starts with you. A lot of the times we get lost in sentimental restraint. A lot of the times we get lost in sentimental pieces. How it used to feel, how we used to think, how it used to be. And then we find ourselves upset that it continues to happen. That's because we're holding on to the thought and not the experience. We're holding on to the thought and not using what we learned from the experience. Sustaining a light that no longer exists. The only way that it exists is with you. And the other way that most of these things exist, you got to stay in that. In order to keep receiving from a certain space, you have to stay in that certain space. So if you want to be in the space you're at, you got to take it at what it is. So if you come from a space of impoverishment and disarray and a life of being hidden behind bottles and goggles and smoke screens, in order to grow in that space, you must maintain more of that. So you must allow it to control you. You allow the wise to be above you. When you want to go into your higher self and you start learning how to question ourselves, and one thing, there was also another thing, that's a point I wanted to hit on. We're taught not to question anything. And that comes from like the lowest form of us on that thought process into that of don't ask questions, I'm grown, that's why I do it. And then you get grown and all you have to go off of is I'm grown, that's why I do it. But you never took the understanding of knowing it. Why do you do certain things? Why do you put yourself into a certain thought process? And you see how I'm using why, because this is us digging out of the ground. We have to dig through those whys to dig up and rise through. Why is that seem easier to do? And as you start going through those whys, you make up your list of whys. That's when you start going into your whats. What am I without that nice shiny necklace with a Jesus piece on it? What am I outside of my pain? Who am I outside of the pains that I've allowed to create, that have created me? That's your breakthrough. What are we outside of the generational curses? Why were they put there? And what are we without them? Certain things don't even hit you anymore. I come from a family structure where you would think based on perception of reality. So you had both parents in your household. For me, even having both of them in the household, there was never more of a disconnect. But it wasn't until I went to the dark side of where my father and his lifestyle that I didn't understand more unity. And then it helped me grow that the unity comes in the dark because now you're forced to depend and grow and connect to the things around you. Usually the people that are more, that in that concept are more holier than thou, they put themselves in a thought process where they're more separated from the world than themselves. And the deeper you are in that religious binding, the more separated from the world you are. But even in that constraint, it goes to the dark first. How does it say that he goes to the sinners first? In order to become something higher, you have to come from something lower. You have to understand you're lower. You have to understand that concept of I was lost, but now I'm found. Critical thought makes you think like that's the part of the protest. You brought awareness to it. So now that you brought the awareness to it, what are you going to do next? You brought awareness to your issues. What are you going to do next? Are you going to foster and fester in those things, or are you going to rise above it? Are you going to take the time to understand it? Are you going to allow yourself to get angry for something that actually matters? Are you going to allow yourself to cleanse yourself through those tears to something that actually matters? Or are you going to get mad because your team lost again? If you understood that if it was your team, what power do you get from it? The things that you bring into your life in this apex at this point in time, is it bringing you power or is it bringing you pain? If it brings you power, how do you continue to create and make more power from it, generate more energy from that power and what you generate from it? And if it's bringing you pain, why is it bringing you pain? It's easy to let go, but it's even easier to hold on. The reason it's so easy to let go, the reason that it's so easy to hold on is because you know what it is at that moment. You know the control point of it because now you have a false sense of control over it. That's why it's so hard to let go, because you don't know what it is outside of that. You've held on to it for so long and used it as a crutch. You don't know that you can walk without the crutches. You've held on so long to that chain around your neck. You don't understand that you can fly. So what crutches, what curses have you allowed to continue to be sustained through the spells that you speak into your psychological mind? What have you allowed into your mind to sustain such crutches? To sustain such crushes? I mean, curses. Crutches. Same, they go together. What demons do you battle instead of trying to understand? Man, I got the demon of that monkey on my back. How did it get there in the first place? Which one of your family members or somebody that was around you did that? Most of the times, we get stuck in that paradigm of, since we don't understand it, only one or two things happen. Ultimately, only one thing happens. It comes back into your life in some way, shape, or form. And until you face it, you constantly feel attacked by it. So, and then the only thing that brings power to it is a distraction of like, it's okay to do it. They say you only live once. Last time I checked, from all the texts that I've been reading and everything that I've read, energy doesn't die. So if we're energy, divine energy, the original divine energy, and I listen to a James Brown album or Al Green album, that energy still resonates and it hits into my mind. I'm still thinking about the time I first time listened to it. So what died exactly? The physical constraint that contained it, the physical conduit at that time point when it was created. But it still sees hold into a memory that's within you. The container of one of my uncles burned himself because he passed out drinking the night he transitioned. He burned away the conduit. But until I understood that, I didn't even understand why I was sitting there turning up so much. Celebrating. It's all positive and negative. What are you celebrating? What are you learning? Most of us go out every single night to celebrate losses, celebrate submission. Well, what have you created? That's why the people that come around you the way they do, because they're connected to that thought process. You're celebrating a loss and celebrate losses together. But when it comes time when you start winning, that's when those people start changing, because you're changing your environment. So you don't fight why they walked away. Let them go. It no longer resonates with who you're becoming. The moment that you start taking that thought process into things of why that walked away from me, and you take the understanding like, damn, I'm not even connected to it anymore, the less emotion you feel towards it. And it hurts at first. I remember my first time when I was stepping away from a lot of different things that I was doing on the weekends and doing during the week. Some of that stuff didn't exist to me anymore, and it didn't speak to me. And that started being like, hey man, we all going out. Like, I'm not feeling it. At first it feels like depressed, like, man, he must be depressed. No, that's not feeling it. I have other things I want to create and work on. I know it takes a sacrifice for myself. As a God, you create through the chaos. As a king, you survey it. As a man, that's your offering. Yeah, as a man, you bring the offering. As a queen, and our queens on that feminine energy, they create every single day, everything from hairstyles to nail art to putting together accessories for clothes. They create, and the queen surveys and wears it. But they go out and they work for it. Or they do something in that conduit of trying to go get it. You're your own support system. Externally around you, as your power grows and you grow into, it's not that you come into your power, you grow into your power. The ones and the beings around you on that same frequency have that same thought process, and then y'all all start doing that same thing. Similar when Kevin Gates had the interview, everybody around him works. Everybody around me works. You have to have that mindset before that plate. Before you even set the table, you have to have the mindset of what you're going to put there. So if I set the thought process in my mind that everybody around me must work, put in the same work, if not more, to go get a bag, guess what happens? Everybody around you that needs to work or is working towards the same goal and in their same mind on that same frequency is going to stay with you. Everybody that's not, and they're just going to feed and keep you held into a certain spot so they can sustain their life, they're going to start falling away. That's when that argumentativeness comes in. That's when the anger comes in. All this stuff was already there. But now that you're moving in your truth, now that you broke that curse and that binding off of you, guess what? Now the only thing that can survive around you is the truth. That's why you have the thought process that the devil tells the sweetest lies. That's the lower self of you lives in the lowest, that lower energy that's inside of you resonates with them. That's where that hook came from. So they're hooked to you based on old paradigms of yourself. You'll have friends that only come around you when you drink. You'll have friends that come around you only when you smoke. You'll basically have friends that come around you only when you turning up and when you party. But let you need something. That's super important. You might need a ride somewhere. You just need someone to talk to, bounce an idea off to, vent to. All they're going to bring around you is the same conduits that brought them around you in the first place. All they can do is what they're programmed to do at that moment in time. All you can control is your reaction. A person shows you their action, you move accordingly. It's all a learning moment. Because the more you start doing that, that's when you start going into all these generational curses of Got to spend it while you here. You can't take it with you. You only live once. Bitches only good for one thing. Niggas only good for one thing. All these small little paradigms in your mind that have been constantly displayed in front of us, and they show us all the time when you look at reality television or look at TV in general. All that stuff just continues to replay itself out because it's stuck in that loop. You are the one that breaks that loop. You are the generator, the operator, and destroyer. So I'm not generating from a place of curses anymore. I'm creating a new paradigm. I'm not operating from those curses and those restraints anymore. I'm operating from a higher sense. I'm not developing in those aspects of those negative. I'm destroying those, and I'm rising to myself, and I'm building something more positive. That's the key. All the things that you're going through and you're overcoming, and you have a deeper understanding of how you overcome it. And then someone says, yo, how did you do that? And all you gotta do is plant that seed and lead that example. If they want to listen, they'll listen. If they want to listen, they'll listen. It'll resonate with them. If they don't, they're gonna get mad. I don't agree with that. So what? You don't have to agree with what's in my reality. I have the proof. I can give you line by line of what I meant by when I first said it. What it meant when it first came through. And this is how I took it in and resonated with my energy to it. So the only arguments that you really have is based on different perspectives of reality. Someone trying to convince you to leave their stuff, and you trying to convince them to convey what you're trying to say. All you can do is control your reaction and plant the seed and keep walking forward. If it's working for you and you can put together the formula that works for you, and at a later time you can display that knowledge onto somebody else and they can use that same formula to rise, congratulations. You came into your God self. You came into your goddess self. You have to make sure everybody eats, but it's how you're making sure everybody eats. Are you enabling or are you disabling? A lot of the times we walk around, we enable people. We become their crutches instead of disabling those syncopes in our minds to take them higher. So, nice little recap. Basically, these generational curses that we suffer from, we have to get into. That's the dirt. That's the dark we have to get into. We have to weed it out. We have to recultivate and till that soil so we rise to our highest self. There's nothing outside of that. The protesting is done. We are aware of it. The protest brings awareness. So how are you going to apply it? The protesting brings awareness. The studying brings the knowledge and brings everything online. Now, how do you apply it to yourself? Breaking down the paradigm of this is bad or this is good and understanding positive and negative, and now you start understanding more. They're doing what they're supposed to do based upon the knowledge that they have. And it can dishearten you like, oh my God, my people aren't waking up. Maybe they're not meant to. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So you getting upset at anything outside of you means there's something inside of you that still resonates with it, reconnects to it. So if you get upset because you see somebody doing something ignorant, you still feel like that's you. That's what's holding you from getting to your higher self. The ultimate let go is that humanity aspect. And I keep bringing it up in these conversations, so I might end up might do a lecture on that, a real bountiful lecture on that. It's about letting go of that humanity, letting go of But what's holding you back is letting go of humanity. In order to let go of something, you must understand it in order for it to be fully taken away. Most of the times we just stray away from it, but we don't have any understanding within it of what it was or what it is or its purpose. So we keep finding something to replace it with. Let's bring power to the day. Let's bring another Ashe, mighty Ashe to the day. I'll catch y'all next time. I love y'all. We love y'all. Divine day.